Professor Noam Chomsky, thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
Very pleased to be with you.
We had to come all the way to Amman, Jordan to talk to you.
Well, you get a free trip.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that you should send the flower to the border control official who said that you could go into the territories.
Actually, Birzeit ought to send the thanks, since it publicized the talk,
Yeah.
which otherwise no one would have ever heard of. I mean, I've talked to Birzeit before, and nobody ever knew.
We were meeting you after the talk, the conference talk, the video talk that you gave to Birzeit. Was there anything in that talk that might have...
Talked about you. It was mostly about, it was about the United States. It was U.S. foreign relations. So, of course, the Middle East came up, and I talked about Israel-Palestine. But, I mean, it doesn't compare to talks that I've given in Israel.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Ministry of Interior apologized and claimed that it was a simple misunderstanding.
No, that's certainly false. It was perfectly well understood. The border official was in constant contact with the ministry, and he played no role. He was simply referring questions and comments from the ministry, and they understood everything, and their reasons were very clear and explicit.
Why? What do you think the reasons were?
I presume they're the ones that kept coming back from the ministry, that he kept asking over and over. One was, well, he did mention, well, they don't like your, they don't like your views, the government. So I said, yes, let's try to find one government in the world that does like my views.
Has it happened to you in any other country in the world?
Well, there's one case of a country which wouldn't allow me in. That was Czechoslovakia under the Russians in 1968. It's hard to think of a case outside of totalitarian states where someone has been refused entry because they've been invited to give a talk at a particular university.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you're going to use this. I can hear your lectures now in the U.S. campuses. That could.
I haven't intended to say anything about it. If I'm asked, I'll.
And why didn't you try to come in after the ministry apologized?
Well, I don't have time. I have a short trip, several countries to visit. I'll go on to the next country.
So you were here in Jordan, Birzeit. You were planning to go to Birzeit, and tomorrow you were leaving for Beirut.
And there's simply no time to add anything.
And is it intentional, the fact that you haven't been to Israel in, what, 12, 13 years? Is it?
No more intentional than the fact that I haven't been to Brazil for the same number of years, or Argentina, or that I've never been to countries that I'm constantly invited to. I mean, I have a very intense series of requests for visits. I can't take a fraction of them.
It's just a matter of a timetable.
Mainly the matter of the timetable and what's high on the agenda. So.
By the way, we could have conducted this interview in Hebrew, right? You speak fluent Hebrew.
I'm rusty. If it was 50 years ago, yes.
Your father was a Hebrew professor.
Yeah, and I lived in Israel for a while, and my Hebrew was, it's obviously an American accent, but it was fluent. I can still read perfectly well, but I wouldn't trust myself to speak. I have to think too hard to get the words out.
But I think it emphasized the complexity of the issue, because on the one hand, you speak Hebrew and you come from a Jewish family, and you talked about anti-Semitism when you were young, and you lived on a kibbutz, and you actually considered staying and living in Israel. And on the other side, you were the most outspoken critic of Israel, and you undermine Israel's right to exist.
That's quite false. In fact, I don't regard myself as a critic of Israel. I regard myself as a supporter of Israel. The people who are harming Israel, in my opinion, and it's what I've said many times, are those who claim to be supporting it. They are helping drive Israel towards moral degeneration and possible ultimate destruction. I think support for Israel should be support for policies which are to its benefit.
But you talk about the fact that you don't support the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state.
I don't support the right.
The Israeli public saw you go and shake hands with Hezbollah's leader Nasrallah just a couple of days before he started bombing Israel and so on.
No, it's not a couple of days before, and furthermore, they saw pictures of me meeting Nasrallah, but they didn't see pictures of me meeting his main enemy, with whom I spent much more time, Walid Jumblat. What's happening is that when I went to Lebanon, as in any other country, I try to find out as much as I can about the country if I have a little time. So I met with the head of Hezbollah. It's a major political force in Lebanon. In fact, in the last elections, the coalition that
yes, but it's also this leader who's calling the demolition of Israel. And
actually, what Hezbollah's position has been is that any position that the Palestinians accept, they'll accept. He doesn't think Israel should exist. Okay.
I mean, he has so many missiles which are aiming Israel, and now he's aiming to bomb Tel Aviv. But you know, even there should.
I'm sorry, he has missiles, but they're used for deterrence. Now, let's go back a step. You said I'm calling for the destruction of Israel, or some words like that.
No, that you.
I don't think it should exist as a Jewish state. Yeah, I don't think the United States should exist as a Christian state. I don't think that Pakistan should exist as an Islamic state.
But there's a big difference, because the United States and Pakistan, there is no nation in the world calling for their destruction and having a nuclear weapon like Iran, for example. And
like Iran does not have nuclear weapons, and it's not calling for the destruction.
It is calling for the destruction. Ahmadinejad is very specific in saying that.
These are quotations that appear in the Israeli press.
I heard him say that in his voice.
No, what he said is, I don't approve of it, he said he was quoting Khomeini during a period when Israel was very close to Iran and didn't mind Khomeini saying it. He said, in the end of time, Israel will disappear, words like that.
No, he was very specific.
But look, Israel is in a position of security well beyond that of many other states, which do not, and insofar as they call themselves not states of their citizens, but states of a particular category of citizens, I object to it, in principle.
So what should I understand from your words? What are you telling Israelis? Go back to Europe,
no, not
live as a minority here in Israel,
Look,
take a chance, disregard history, sit on the beach. What should we understand from your, what is your action tomorrow morning?
Exactly what I write 1,000 times. Though I was opposed to the existence of a Jewish state, and that was part of the Zionist movement, remember, as a Zionist youth leader, yes, I was opposed to the forming a Jewish state. Once it was formed, 1948, my position has consistently been that Israel should have all the rights of every state in the international system, no more and no less. Now, Israel demands more, and I don't agree with that.
Now, Dershowitz, you know, 2 weeks ago I interviewed Dershowitz on this show, and he said that, quote, "You are our enemy's biggest assets are Israeli bashing Jews like Professor Chomsky."
Well, that's a problem for Dershowitz. I have no interest in what he said. I mean, if you want the truth, he's a dedicated liar who's been exposed over and over again. He didn't quote me, you notice. He didn't, because he knows better than to quote.
By the way, he offered to come to Birzeit to debate you. Do you think that they would invite a person like Dershowitz to come and talk in Birzeit?
You have to ask Birzeit. That doesn't make any difference to me. But I mean, I've agreed to debate him reluctantly because he's extremely dishonest, but I do it. But this issue is there's nothing to debate. I mean, Israel should have the rights of any state, period. It wants more.
Because its right to exist is questionable on many other states in the world.
But no state, the United States doesn't demand that Mexico accept the right of the United States to exist,
because
sitting on half of Mexico.
But because there isn't a threat. When you hear and listen what Hamas leaders say, what Iran leaders say, what Hezbollah leaders say, you understand that there's an immediate threat on Israel.
You don't understand that. In 1970s, when this claim was made for the first time, as far as I know, it was when Egypt in 1971 offered Israel a full peace treaty, nothing for the Palestinians. 1971, Israel rejected it because it would have meant withdrawal from the Sinai. It's the only state I know of which wants recognition of its right to exist.
Is there any relevance to the fact that you're Jewish, do you think, when you make these claims, when you preach in this?
Since I'm Jewish and since I have a special relationship with Israel since childhood and since I care about it, I think it should take positions that are moral, realistic, and appropriate for its own decent survival.
And aren't you afraid that even if you feel that you're working for Israel, your arguments, and you're the very articulate in making your arguments and are well heard because of your world reputations, aren't you afraid that these arguments will be misused From the academic boycott to the nuclear weapon in Iran.
Well, actually, the academic boycott, if you bother to read, is one that I've opposed.
Of course, that's what I'm saying.
It's true that my statements will be misused, for example, by Dershowitz, who is very dangerous for Israel. But yes, he's
dangerous for Israel?
Extremely, and he distorts and misrepresents my statements in ways which help his cause of supporting Israeli aggression and expansion, which is very dangerous for Israel.
But even if I can understand or try to understand the academic, philosophical approval of a person like you for the freedom of speech, even of Holocaust deniers.
Not even, specifically. It's specifically for views you detest, for which you call freedom of speech.
Up to a certain point. Up to a certain point, because history has proved otherwise. I mean,
doesn't matter.
You know, you're taking a lot of responsibility on your arms.
I believe in freedom of speech for Alan Dershowitz, even though the record of his exposed lies is incredible.
You're bothered by Dershowitz's lies, and you're not bothered by the lies of Holocaust deniers?
On the contrary, I'm not saying I'm bothered by Dershowitz's lies. I say yes, we should insist on the freedom of speech for dedicated liars. And in the case of, say, the Holocaust denial, yeah, that's of course outrageous, just as it's outrageous to deny what we did, namely wiping out millions of Indians.
But you know, the number one, I think, argument against what you preach for is the double standard, saying that, you know, from talking of freedom of speech in countries where freedom of speech does not exist, you're going to Lebanon tomorrow, or when you go to, even here in Jordan, I don't think it's limited compared to Israel. Is Israel as bad as other countries?
Did I ever say that?
You spend so much time targeting Israel.
Really? Did Amnesty International ask me to give a talk that they could use to criticize human rights violations in Israel? No, they did it for Syria.
But you said you have limited time. Looking in the map in the world, there are so many problems. Why is Israel in the center? Israel still, if you look around, is trying, is struggling, is trying to give democracy away, and it has gay rights and human rights.
If you started by asking why is Israel in the center, answer, it isn't. Not for me. What's in the center for me is the United States, and for a very elementary moral reason. The moral principle is we are responsible for our own actions and their consequences. Every crime that Israel commits is because of U.S. participation and authorization. So any decent American citizen, even without a special interest in Israel, as I have, should have these in the center of their attention, because those are the ones we're participating in, we're responsible for, and responsible.
But what is worse in your eyes, the actions in Israel and in the territories, or for example, what's going on in Afghanistan now? How do you prioritize these two?
There's no way to, because I talk about both of them all the time.
But is Israel what's going on in Israel as severe as what's going on in Darfur, Afghanistan,
let's
Sudan?
Take Darfur. In the case of Darfur, yes, the crimes are worse, but there is much less that I can do about them. Much less, almost nothing, in fact. So yes, it's fine to sign petitions criticizing them, but there's no moral value to that.
And you feel moral value because A, you're a citizen of the U.S., and B, you have connections to Israel, and you feel that you're part of
Let's put aside the personal connection to Israel, which is there, but if I had no connection to Israel at all, simply as an American citizen, it would be of prime concern, because the U.S. is decisively involved. But Israel, for example, could not attack Gaza, could not carry out the occupation and so on, without decisive and direct U.S. diplomatic, military, and economic support.
You know, I think you're taking a lot of responsibility here.
A person should take responsibility for what they are responsible for.
Yeah, but you are so convinced for many years in your theories, you obviously don't see an existential danger to Israel.
There is a danger. It's posing a danger to itself.
You see it only from that. But you're asking Israeli government to take a risk. You're saying, I'm going back to the nuclear issue, because...
let's take the nuclear issue. Okay. There's a way to...
what if you're wrong? That's what I'm asking.
Look, you have to make judgments on the basis of your best assessment of the facts available. So that there's no...
But shouldn't we learn from history? There were voices before the World War who didn't take Hitler that serious, and history unfortunately proved us wrong. How can you be so sure that Ahmadinejad is not going to wipe Israel of the
government. You
government.
can't be sure. So therefore, what you should do is take steps to mitigate the threat, to the extent that it exists. The obvious step to take to mitigate the threat is to move towards instituting a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East region.
Okay.
That will mitigate the threat.
That is the threat. So you're saying...
Excuse me, that's important. Now, Israelis who don't want to do that are harming Israel.
But in your eyes, you're quite sure that there is no immediate threat on Israel?
Right now,
from outside of Israel? The threat is inside.
I think Israeli...
But what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong and people are using your argument to have the international community look the other way?
Suppose those who claim there's a threat are wrong, and in fact, by making that claim, they're harming Israel. Yeah, that's perfectly possible. In fact, it's true. So whatever position you take, there's a possibility that it's wrong. If you have the interests of Israel at heart, then what you would want to do is reduce the possibility of any nuclear threat in the region. And there is an immediate way to do that, which is supported virtually by the entire world. And that is to move towards establishing a nuclear weapons-free zone. So let's do that. Well, Israel's refusing, and the United States is refusing. Now they repeat the words. They say, oh yes, nice idea. But they say we can't do it until there's a comprehensive peace settlement. Well, that's saying we can't do it, period. Now what's blocking a comprehensive peace settlement? Well, we know the answer. The United States and Israel are opposed to the world on a political settlement on the international border, with maybe along the lines of the Taba negotiations, which would lead to a comprehensive peace settlement. Everyone in the world is supporting that. Now, by opposing that,
well, you say everyone in the world, and then you go on. It is questionable. People, it's not that sure that the Palestinians can go through with this agreement. They have the Hamas on one hand, they have the Fatah on.
I'm just saying, look, every relevant actor is in favor of this. Now, Israel and the United States are not only opposed to it in words, they're blocking it in deeds. Furthermore, international law is in favor of it.
Okay, that's of course your opinion.
No, it's not my opinion. That's where the occupied territories, Israeli actions in the occupied territories with crucial U.S. backing are, first of all, illegal. Israel recognized that in 1967. They're illegal. And they're harmful.
Well, unfortunately, we can't solve that problem. We can agree, though, it's a complex situation. It's not black and white. But I understand that while your parents were alive, you were more cautious in making those arguments against Israel.
I don't make arguments against Israel. I make arguments for Israel.
For Israel, okay. Making these arguments for Israel, as you say. Was it a factor? I mean, was it hard for you? Because
I was unhappy about the fact that they were subjected to a series of tantrums from hysterics in the United States. But I said the same things, and in fact, they approved of them.
So when in Israel they consider you to be someone who is harming Israel, does it hurt you personally?
Who considers
I mean, the public opinion. I mean,
the public opinion is reading what you're presenting to them.
But I'm asking, does it offend you personally? Are you upset that is the portrayal
just like
of you?
I'm upset by the fact that people in other countries in the world think I'm the greatest danger to their country.
Is it tiring?
Tiring?
Yeah.
I expect it. Any dissident and critic can anticipate that they're going to be subjected to hysterical tirades. If you're a Soviet dissident, did you expect to be treated nicely? In fact, do you think of a dissident in any country who's treated nicely? Let's go back in history. Let's take Israel, okay? You go back to the Bible. You studied the Bible, I'm sure.
Yeah.
In the Bible, there is someone who's called a hater of Israel, the prophet Elijah. King Ahab, you know, the epitome of evil in the Bible.
So in a way, you see yourself as a prophet?
I'm not saying that. No. I'm seeing the prophets as intellectuals.
So it's your life mission, and therefore even
it's not my life's mission. It's the mission of any decent human being. Well, take Elijah or Jeremiah or Isaiah or any of them. Were they treated nicely? No, they were treated very badly. Elijah was called a hater of Israel, hater of Israel. Centuries later, he was honored, but not at the time. There were people who were honored at the time. Centuries later, they're called false prophets. Centuries later.
That was my. I'm laughing because I'm smiling because that was my next question. How do you think history will judge you?
That's up to history. Depends who wins.
And the Jewish history.
It depends who wins the battles.
If you had taken the other path in the 1950s and stayed in Israel, where would you think we would find you?
I would be with my friends in Israel who say the same thing. And you can read them in the press every day.
And if you wouldn't live in the States, where would you live?
If I wouldn't
anywhere else. 5 years ago, you were asked the question.
I was asked the question in an interview in Haaretz, and I said, well, I'd certainly go to Israel. Now I wouldn't say that. It's changed in the last few years. It's changed in ways which are extremely harmful to the country. You can see it harming itself day after day. It's in a mood of, not the whole country, but leading sectors, including the government, are in a mood of paranoia and irrationality, which is harming the country very seriously. I mean, my own case is so trivial it doesn't matter, but just take this trivial case. If the Ministry of Interior had not refused entry and I'd gone to give a talk,
we wouldn't have.
That would be the end of it. Nobody would have ever heard of it, just as nobody heard of other talks I've given in Birzeit. But that's minor. On the other hand, purposely humiliating the Turkish ambassador, that's not minor. Take, say, the reaction to the Goldstone report, which is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. Israel has turned it into an international incident. If Israel had acted rationally, they would have responded to the Goldstone report by saying, thank you, Mr. Goldstone, for your careful work. Thank you particularly for giving us a great gift, as he did. If you're concerned about the safety of Israel, you should be concerned about these matters, because in case after case, the irrationality and the paranoia is very harmful and destructive. And in the long term, it could lead to very serious consequences.
Professor Noam Chomsky, thank you very much. תודה רבה. שהתראיינת. תודה רבה.